I'm hoping like what we get out today is just, I know a lot of us have probably, it's already been a year since we've been on Zoom, like utilizing, online formats to like meet with people. Some of us have onboarded, like early on, and you know, we've been able to integrate ourselves using the technology fairly seamlessly. And then, there's also those of us that have had difficulties in learning how to integrate the technology and finding ways to kind of just structure it throughout your Pathfinder meetings. But what I'm hoping that what you'll get out today is just one, a better understanding of how to utilize the technology, particularly Zoom, and maybe a couple other technological devices and online formats that could help you run your meetings. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So if you don't know me, like my name is Jason Osio. I do have a background in marriage and family therapy, and I'm a behavior analyst. And I'm the co-director at Glendale Filipino, like SDA Church. So the way that I kind of got started with this was my mom is actually the director at our church. And when the pandemic started, like I'm sure a number of you guys are probably familiar, if you're not used to using a computer, if you're not really used to using Zoom, if you're not used to like researching things on websites and finding ways to integrate that, like the idea of actually trying to run a meeting like online could be pretty daunting. And that's exactly what happened with my mom. Like she did it like as the director at the time, she had a lot of difficulties in trying to figure out how am I going to run my meetings in a pandemic, like with my kids, because the only thing I know how to do is use my email and I could check it through my phone. But that's the furthest that she's able to do. So then she reached out to me because at the time at work, I kind of helped spearhead and developed how we utilize telehealth technologies. And I'm not going to say I'm like the best at it, but at least knew enough to get things started for our company. And then along the process throughout the pandemic, we just kind of learned to integrate more and more technology. And now like we're, fully functional and running year strong, like at our company. So bringing some of those tools with us today. So first off, I did want to discuss like what our meeting agenda would be. So I want to discuss a couple of challenges that many clubs face, in these times in trying to integrate the technology into their meetings. We're going to go pretty basic at first, which would discuss like, how to access your account, because sometimes if you're going to be utilizing Zoom as your main platform, and it's pretty much going to be the one platform that we're going to be talking about today. So we won't really go into things like, like Google Meet or like other platforms. So it's mostly going to be on Zoom, about Zoom. We're going to discuss, what are some of those basic functions, as well as setting up your privacy settings. And then later on in the presentation, we're going to talk about how to engage your club, like online, and just a couple resources that I've kind of pulled together that may or may not help you with your club. So that's what we'll be going over for today. All right. I do have a little thing that I'd like you guys to try. I'll probably be interspersing this poll. So if you have like a phone or a browser and everything like that, go ahead and log in on this. It's at pollev.com, and you'll just type in the username Jason Osio 797, and we'll be kind of utilizing this as a poll that we do throughout like the session. So I have one thing that's here on the screen right now. And the question would be, what challenges does your club face in running a successful meeting over distance learning? So I kind of want to hear from you guys because we're talking about how do we actively engage people like within our clubs online. This is one tool that I like to use, and it's a good, easy poll running thing. And it gets like instant feedback from the people that. So again, if you log in here, you can see it at the top, pollev.com/JasonOsio797, and I'll activate on my side and we could see what you guys are thinking. Okay. And let me just get Let me share this with you guys on your end so you guys can see. All right. It should be activated. Okay. And let's give it a minute just to see where things are at. And I'll share this portion. There we go. All right. I have so far just 100% that people just really having difficulty engaging the youth. And then if you are really having trouble like with the poll thing, you could also just answer in the chat box. I just like to hear like feedback. There we go. Okay. All right. So looking like, wow, a lot of you guys have the same mind. So difficulty engaging like the youth of your church is probably the most difficult thing that most of you guys probably struggle with in running telehealth sessions or distance learning formats then. Okay, good to know. All right, so some of the challenges, after just, talking like with Steve and a couple, club directors that I know, like what I found is that there's the inability to adapt the technology into club meetings. So people just really having difficulty in understanding, different online formats, things like Zoom, how to use it, really basic things. Another thing would just be the lack of staff training on utilizing the technology. Sometimes you might have an individual that's, the director, like I'm going to use the example like my mom, who's very not super technologically savvy. So trying to onboard her staff was probably going to be a difficult thing to do. So, and when you're going to utilize the technology and running your sessions, then you got to make sure that whoever's meeting with your staff knows how to use the technology as well. So training becomes really important at that point. And then we have difficulty engaging youth over distance learning. So I think this was the biggest point when we took our little poll earlier that a lot of you guys seem to struggle with, is just how do we keep our kids engaged? How do we keep things interesting for them? How do we make sure that they're learning and they're taking like what we're saying and integrating into their lives and into whatever it is that we're trying to disseminate in our Pathfinder meetings. So this would be the part where we talk about just the bare basics of like getting you onboarded onto Zoom. So if a lot of you guys probably know this already, but this is for those of you that don't, we're going to just start at the very beginning, and that's always at setting up your Zoom account. Now, there is a paid version of Zoom, but like for most people, you could sign up for a free account. Probably the biggest distinction that you'll probably notice is if you have a free account is that your Zoom sessions will probably only last for about 45 minutes. And then again, you're going to have to tell everyone to rejoin after that 45 minutes. But if you have a paid account, the time is unlimited at that point. But if you're only just meeting with one other person on a free account, it's unlimited as well. It's when you're running meetings with more than 2 people that you're probably going to run into some of those issues. So if you go into your website and then you log into like the Zoom website, so it's like here at the top, I have like a step-by-step thing that what you could do on the right. So you would log in here. You would log into your account and then you click on your settings. And this is here on the very left where you see the big old settings circle with the arrow. And it's going to then lead you into a system of settings right here. So for example, this will be a drop-down list and you could scroll up and down and it's going to list everything that you could put onto your Zoom account. And again, like some of these items are going to be there for like the free account, but then there are some other features that are going to be exclusive to your paid account. So this right here, if you notice, on the right, you'll see this little button. Right now it's gray. That means it's off. So if you really want to have the waiting room function, which I'd highly recommend for a Zoom session, you'd want to make sure that you toggle that to be on. And you're just going to go ahead, and it's a really long list of things that are here. You're going to adapt it to what you think would be most useful for your Zoom sessions. There are definitely features that I don't think are, super necessary, but the ones that I suggest are down here on the bottom. If you're going to be running like Zoom sessions like frequently with your clubs. So those would be here, like the waiting room. That's what all of you guys were put in at the very beginning when you started like this session. Like if you're meeting with like your club or your staff like ahead of time and you don't want your kiddos to join in right away, they'll automatically be put into the waiting room until you are ready for everyone to join. We have like the co-host feature, which basically means that like right now, this is, Steve's Zoom account. And if he wants another person to, share the responsibility, being able to like admit people, share screens, a couple of those like host only abilities, he could enable someone to be like a co-host and run things like with him. So that would be me in this case. This isn't necessary, but I really like using this tool because it leads into engagement, which is something I'll talk about later, but meeting polls, annotation, the whiteboard, breakout rooms, and like immersive view. So these are the things that I would suggest that you scroll through your settings and then you just go ahead and click them on. What you'll notice at the end is after you log out of your Zoom account and then you log back in, sometimes on the bottom of your Zoom screen, which you're probably looking at now if you're on a laptop or like computer, you'll notice some of those buttons like being there, and that's how you know that, something like the breakout rooms or the meeting polls are enabled. Okay. So we're going to go into some of the basics of Zoom. So first things first, like just changing your background. Not a necessary thing, but when you're working with kids, like finding ways to keep things interesting is always going to need to be at the back of your mind, because what's easily going to disengage people is when things become repetitive, boring, and mundane. So if you're thinking about having a tool that engages the kiddos, in your Pathfinder club, you could do something like, all right, we could change our background to something fun. And sometimes you could set up an activity where it's just like, all right, like let's say you're doing like a lesson on, Daniel and the Lion's Den or whatnot, and you want to just kind of just see what their impression of like what mood do you think Daniel would be feeling if he's down in the Lion's Den. Just like change your background to what you think that might be, and then that's another way that they could just do a quick Google search. I promise you, your kids are probably better at doing a lot of these things than you are, and they've probably been doing it for months at this time. But like it gives you a good scope of like, oh, this is what they're thinking of. This is what they gravitate toward, and it could also then just be another discussion point, like for you. So if I was to use this screen as an example, like, oh, this person, decide to put her background as, like the beach. I'm like, oh, I see that you're feeling nice and breezy. Like, why'd you choose the beach? or I noticed that you put a picture of like a living room. Like, do you like to be at home more? Like, so it's another talking point if you're going to just really be actively engaging your Pathfinders. All right. So some of the ways that you could do that, again, I'll reference this a lot. You're going to need to go into your settings. Again, this kind of just helps, build the rapport between like your clients. I apologize, I use this for work. So you could interchange clients and Pathfinders. It also kind of hides the backgrounds that may be distracting to others. Sometimes you you know, a lot of us are working from home. Like there might be that mess or that pile of laundry like in the back, and you don't really have space to really move your computer like elsewhere. Sometimes having that background could minimize the distractions around you. Now, I did list a couple of links down here where if you want to download like a video, you could also set that as your background. Now, on the picture to the right, this is how you would set up your virtual background. You're going to click on your settings, and you'll usually see it on the Zoom window. If you go down to the bottom left, like, you know, your settings will pop up over there. Click that button. You'll see choose virtual background. You're going to start with clicking that little button. Like if there's a picture or video that you chose from somewhere else, but they also have, you know, predetermined Zoom like settings that you could also use. Whatever that may be, you just choose and select, and bam, your setting is automatically now, like your background picture is now automatically put into like your Zoom background. All right. Now, so Zoom also just released like a new feature. We were just talking about it right before we let everyone in, but it's actually a really fun feature that, you know, I started utilizing with my kids this week, and like they loved it. They were they got to choose like which background to use and everything like that. But what this is called is an immersive view, and it just kind of shifts you know, the standard standalone boxes that you're probably seeing right now on Zoom into something that's a little bit more integrated, something that makes it look like you're in one shared space setting. And again, it could be pretty entertaining and engaging to people that have already installed the update. So like if there's something that I would suggest you doing like after like this Zoom session, like make sure that you go into like your Zoom setting under your profile and then just click on like the update Zoom, and then it'll update your services, and then the immersive view will be there for you. Now, what that would look like, so once you've updated your Zoom to include the newest features, one of which would be like the immersive view. The other one would be the other cool feature with that is if you like using emojis, and I know like a lot of our kiddos love using emojis to communicate like over Zoom, you have the full gambit of emojis that are there too. But you'll start for the immersive view, you'll see here view. You're going to click that, and then this little drop down menu will pop up. You're going to want to click on the immersive, and then kabam, your Zoom sessions could actually look like this. So like what I was saying earlier is like right now, all of us are probably in boxes, our own standalone boxes on Zoom. With this new feature, you could actually kind of run like your sessions. And it'll only look like this if you have the new update like installed. Otherwise, on your side, if you don't have the update, it'll look like just a blank screen in your face. And that's it. So this is just one way to make things look a little bit more interesting and engaging with the kiddos that you're working with. All right. If you've ever have done a session with me, I am a very big fan of the mute feature. So as you could probably figure out, I work with like a lot of kids, but and background noise and people needing to assert their opinions, you know, at inappropriate times, you know, that happens from time to time. So this is where I feel the mute feature, you know, is actually a really good tool to kind of help, you know, minimize, again, the distractions. Again, it sort of helps facilitate, you know, turn taking between individuals. So like if you're trying to have like a discussion, you know, having people understand like, okay, now it's my turn to talk, now it's your turn. Like it really helps, you know, mitigate that. It also you could also silence individuals that may be engaging in a lot of attention seeking behaviors that, you know, could be distracting to others. So, and there are behavioral strategies that I could talk about that, but the one tool that you have easily at your disposal is the mute feature. Okay. And just like a nice, simple little thing, you could have yourself on mute, or you could be unmuted. But if you want to just, toggle like the space bar, you could unmute yourself briefly. And then once you take off the space bar, like, it'll go back to mute. So if you don't always have to just find that microphone button and move your mouse and then click on it, you could just use your space bar. It's a nice little shortcut if you just want to briefly put something in there. Okay. Now, the ways that you would kind of do that, there's a couple ways that you can mute people. You'll need to have like your participant window popped up. So like on the very bottom of your Zoom screen, there's going to be a button there that says participant. You're going to want to make sure that you press that. Something on your right, if you're on a computer or a desktop, you're going to see something that pops up on the right. It'll give you all the list of the participants, and then you'll see this nice little mute button right there, and you could just click them and like mute. If you're on like a phone or a tablet, it'll pop up the same thing, but it'll basically take up like the full screen. So that's how you would use this feature. I think privacy is like a pretty big thing, and that we should, definitely try to maintain like the privacy and safety of, the people that like we work with. So some of the ways to do that is just making sure that in the beginning, like in your settings, that you have things like the waiting room and or a password, like to the Zoom account that you are using. I know, like, churches like my church, they like have one big church meeting that gets used for every single meeting. My suggestion would be to compartmentalize a little bit. So everything that we do for Pathfinders, I use my personal like Zoom account, and it's all password protected, just so that people that I don't want to come in and join in a meeting without me knowing, that I could prevent that as much as possible, so that it really maintains like the privacy of those that are within your meetings. Again, you're going to want to go in your setup into your meetings like we talked about in the very beginning, and just make sure that you have those buttons toggled on, and you want to specify which ones you want. So make sure if you have like either the waiting room and or password. I think Zoom automatically will make it so that either one of these are populated on yours, on your end, but you can modify it in your settings on your own. Again, so like when we talk about the waiting room, every time you're joining in Zoom, you're probably going to see like this little screen where it puts you inside. It lets you as the administrator, you could approve who goes in and out of your waiting room. I usually like to use the waiting room because it helps, like with your prep time. If you're having, preset meetings with your teams, like let's say you're having a Pathfinder meeting that is supposed to meet at 3:00 on a regular basis, but you want to make sure you have that touch time with the staff that's going to be working with them. You could say, okay, we're going to meet at 2:45. You only let in your staff members, and then once 3:00 rolls around, you could mass let everyone into the meeting when you're ready. Okay. And again, the waiting room does help screen for individuals attempting to access your meeting room. All right. So a couple tools that you'll probably utilize in Zoom. We use it frequently, and I'm using it right now. It's our screen sharing tool. So what this basically means is that I have something on my screen that I want to project out to the people that are there. So this is our content sharing. So I have a couple things over here. Like a lot of people like to get really fancy with how they project things to like their students, to their Pathfinders or whatnot. I'm not really going to go into a lot of those because those are very unique and for the incredibly tech savvy. So like if you're a teacher, like at a school, I'm pretty sure that things like the Osmo projectors and phones, like multiple devices are going to be well within your repertoire at this point, because if you've been doing distance learning, these are probably tools that you're utilizing all the time. I'm not going to say that these are necessary for you to actively run your Pathfinder meetings, but they are very helpful in, again, engaging your Pathfinders in different ways. Okay. All right. So this is like, what would it look like? So on the very bottom of your screen, you'll probably see a button that says screen share. You would have to be the host, or you'd have to create the settings so that it allows, yourself or like other people to share materials. But I'm going to go over each of these, very briefly. Once you click on that bottom, the button on the bottom, you'll be led to this screen. And these are some of the basic screen sharing options. So on the left right here, these will probably show everything that you have popped up on your screen, like at the moment. But you're only going to want to share like one at a time, kind of a thing. So right now, like if I want to share what's on my desktop at the moment, I would click on desktop, and you'll see it highlighted in blue. And then on the bottom right, there's going to be a button. It's kind of hidden behind this basic screen sharing options bubble, but that'll say share screen. Once you share screen, whatever's on my screen at the desktop will then be projected, to you guys. Kind of like right now, like if you see just below that, I have a Microsoft PowerPoint thing. That's what I'm doing right now. I would just click on this, and then I would share screen, and then it would project this presentation to you guys. I'll talk about a couple of these later, but I probably think the biggest one that you could utilize during your sessions are utilizing the whiteboard. But I have another slide on that later, but that function would be here under the share screen option. All right. Now, you also have some advanced share screen options as well. This is where the people that like to get really fancy with the technology, these things will probably pop up over here. So sometimes they might have a second camera. They might have another device that they'll utilize for sharing. Those things will pop up here under the advanced. The thing that I like to do is sometimes I have, multiple things on my screen, and I don't want to really jump around between sharing this screen and then unsharing and then sharing a different window or something like that. So sometimes what I like to do is I like to share a portion of the screen, which means that on one side of the screen I have like this little video, and then I could easily shift the box to like another side of my screen to share whatever is important on that side. So what that would look like is that there's this green little box right here that specifies what portion of your screen that I'm going to share. So whatever's inside this box is what's going to be seen to like everyone else. So you could specify, oh, it might start up there, but this is what I want people to see. And that's what's going to be projected over here. Now, I said earlier that I like to utilize the whiteboard. The whiteboard, I feel, is a nice little useful tool to kind of just like get that engagement between your Pathfinders. You would just start that share screen button that's on the bottom. It'll populate under the basic thing like the whiteboard. You're going to want to click that, and you're going to share screen, and then it'll lead you into like a basic whiteboard, and then you could kind of draw and do different things like on it. So you'll kind of have things like, oh, okay, you could write texts, you could like annotate, you could stamp, like these are a couple things that you could do like on the whiteboard. And you could have the annotate, if you have the annotate feature on, you and all the kiddos that are there on Zoom can then actually draw and manipulate things on the whiteboard as well. So like, let's say there was an activity that was like on here where you have to try, like, let's say you're doing like a word search and you want to see who could find the most, like they could all do this at the same time. So a couple of the features that are here with the annotate feature, and you can either do this on the whiteboard or you can do this on any, worksheet or that you pop up. Like these all work with that as well. So you could have like the select tool, which just means you select that. The draw tool populate a bunch of different like, types of lines, shapes, and things that you could use to draw with, or things that you could use to highlight with. You have a text box feature that you could put in so you could type things into your Pathfinders, and then you have stamps. Well, what I like to do with stamps is I like to assign, like, every kiddo has to have like their own stamp, like, for this activity. So I could identify, like, let's say we're going to, the screen is in like 4 boxes, and I want them to say which one are they feeling that they want to do next, and they get to make choices. They could stamp in the box or the activity that they want to do, and that lets me know, oh, these are the preferences of like some of people that are in my meeting right now. So that's one feature. There is a spotlight tool, which basically is like this little red dot that lets you highlight whatever is on your screen. So you could just make that little red dot like really accentuate this particular point on this part of the screen. Other ways you could also do that is utilizing like the arrow feature, which then again is like, all right, I want you guys to pay attention to this thing right here. So it really helps if you're doing like a visual story, or if there's like, text that you have, like, let's say you're looking at Bible verses, and you want them to look specifically at, verse 32, like you could utilize that arrow tool to just, again, highlight, hey guys, look here. And it's a nice little visual prompt to kind of center their attention to. And again, like, a lot of these are probably fairly self-explanatory, but you have like an eraser tool, which, erases things that are on your screen. You have a format tool, which basically states that that you could change the color of whatever it is that you're drawing. There's the undo button, which, totally undoes the last action that you did. The redo places back something if you accidentally removed it. And the clear all basically just wipes the screen clean. Again, I think the annotate feature is something that's incredibly helpful when you're trying to engage your Pathfinders in your meetings. So you'll want to make sure, again, that this feature is activated on your Zoom account, and you have to really make sure that the host has it activated on their account. Like, sometimes, there might be someone that does like a link that sends out a link, like your church might have a link. But you yourself might be hosting like the meeting. You want to make sure that on the host account that these things are toggled. Okay. Again, these are just some visual representations of what it might look like if you're annotating. Like, these are examples of like, what our kids do. So we did like a project where it's like, okay, I want us all collectively to draw a house together. Okay. Or like, someone draw like the tree that Zacchaeus climbed into, or something like that. This is a great way to encourage a lot of collaboration between your teams over there. And then again, kids are kids and they like to be silly, so it's kind of fun to kind of intersperse something that they think would be very fun and entertaining, something to kind of joke about. But you could have them kind of just draw like on each other's like screens and stuff like that. I will say, depending on the kids that you have, sometimes you might want to take a little bit more control of some of these features. You could always stop a feature from your end if you feel like it's being like incredibly disruptive to your meetings. Because there are times when you don't want particular kids to really have free range at what they want to do during sessions. Okay. We talked about the whiteboard. These are some things that I like to utilize the whiteboard for. And this is if I'm just a little bit more unprepared, going to sessions. I didn't really have something pre-planned or pre-made. I usually like to have things ready off the cusp, but sometimes things pop up in the middle, like your meetings, and you're like, oh, okay. I know that a lot of my kiddos need a lot of visual representations so we could activate those, the various ways that they learn. So these are some tools that I like to utilize, the whiteboard and the annotate feature. So sometimes I like to do written schedules. Like if we're going to have a meeting and I want, like I'm trying to prime like the Pathfinders into expecting what is it that we're going to be doing? How long are each of these activities going to be? Sometimes having that written schedule, like on the whiteboard. If you're working with adventurers, you could probably use like first then boards. Like before we're going to do this activity, we have to like do this one first, and then a couple of these are also like, you know, little behavioral tools, but like token charts, choice boards, like games, and written and visual prompts. Like those are all just kind of things to help, you know, like help like the learners that might need a multimodality approach in understanding what it is that you're trying to work on for that day and the instructions that you're providing. Another feature that I think is like, you know, really helpful is this remote control feature. What that basically means is that, like, let's say I'm running a session and there's a game that's here. I could give access to another kid or another person like that's in my meeting to control the mouse or the cursor like on the screen, and they could actually click on each individual item. So like, let's say we were playing like a memory game or something like that, and I wanted, you know, I wanted this TLT to be in charge of that meeting. So I could give him remote access and I could have him actually, you know, choose and select things and control things like on my screen. So that's what the remote control function is. And again, the way that you would do this is that if you like highlight, if you go to like the top part of your screen, kind of where you see your annotate feature and your share screen stuff here, there would be like something that says like view options, and then there's going to be a drop down list that lets you see give remote control access to. And then once you do that, you specify the person that you give access to, and then they would have access to moving around your mouse and selecting things that are on your screen. You could also take it away if they're like after their turn is done, or if you feel like it's again starting to like be attention seeking or like inappropriate in any way. All right. One of the features that I suggested that you should probably add, but it's not necessary. Like when I'm running sessions, I'm always thinking about how are we going to be engaging like our youth? How are we going to be engaging the people that are here like in these meetings? Because when you're on Zoom, it becomes really easy to just kind of just have it there in the background and you just are chilling and sitting on your couch and you're passively learning as things are there. So when you introduce things that, you know, engage your individuals, you'll get more out of them during your meeting. So one of these engagement tools that I like to talk about is like really putting in some of like your polls. And these polls engage various types of engagement between, you know, the host and its audience. And it also, you're also as the host able to gain, you know, various information, you know, from the people that are submitting your answers. So for example, like earlier in the session, I asked, I had a poll that I wanted to know what are some of the things that you guys are struggling with. I could see in real time what are some of the concerns that you guys had. And this is how we found out engagement and finding creative ways to actively involve like your Pathfinders over your distance learning, online learning platforms, how knowing that would be, you know, useful information, and how we can then problem solve to utilizing some of these tools to actively engage your Pathfinders. So the poll feature is like one of my is a really good feature to use when you're working with your Pathfinders. And this is what it would look like on, you know, like from your end. So you could see exactly, let's say you chose this question, my favorite color is green. you'll see all the options, and then you'll see what percentage of people responded in that way. So again, if you're doing like a Bible game, or you're doing, there's a lesson study that you're working on, you can easily type in the question that you want them to use, and then toss out that information. You'll get the information pretty quickly. All right. Probably one of like my biggest features that I utilize all the time, especially like with our Pathfinder meetings, are the breakout rooms. Okay, again, we would have to make sure that this is set up in our account management settings. So making sure that your settings have all these things toggled on. Now, what breakout rooms are is that right now we're all in one large meeting room. But the problem with that is that when you're in one large meeting room, not everyone is going to feel compelled to engage with, the host. Not everyone wants to talk. People, especially if you're more on the passive, or if you're naturally like an introvert, like you're not going to really feel like you're going to want to participate like all too much. So sometimes you could utilize, a tool like the breakout room to split up this larger group into smaller rooms. And so so the benefits that I like to get out of this, and if you're splitting people up into smaller groups, like it makes them work on group projects, a little bit easier. You can get more engagement. You have people that, might be a little bit more shyer in like a larger group. They could probably open up a little bit more. If it's in a smaller group of like, 2 to 4 people, you could work on, if you're working on your investiture classes, like you could group all your friends, your companions, your explorers, all the way up to guide, like in different breakout rooms, so they could be working on their course requirements together with the rest of their peers that they should be working on these things with. Sometimes you might you have a day that you might be dedicating to like honors classes and whatnot, and sometimes there might be days where your club isn't working on the same honor because half of them have already done it in friend class, and the other half, like they still need to like learn it. So you might want to use a breakout room so that half of those people could do that honor in one room, and the other could be doing some other activity. And like the other thing that you can also use, I like utilizing the breakout rooms for, is that if you ever need to do a pullout meeting, or so you could easily do that. So I use this all the time whenever I have a client or a Pathfinder that I might feel is like, being a bit disruptive, or it visibly looks like they're having a difficult time with whatever's happening in our meeting or our session right now. And I need to pull that person out of that room, help, de-escalate, help them decompress. And then if we need to reintegrate back into the group, we could do that. So this is where having those breakout rooms could like be really, really helpful. So what that would look like, and let me break out from here, because I'm all about practicing these things with you guys. You would just specify as a host, how many rooms do you want to use? And then you're going to see a prompt on your screen. You're going to click on that. So when you see it, go ahead and click on those rooms. And it'll automatically bring you inside that breakout room. And this also lets me know who's actively participating in this meeting right now. So you can kind of see like all you guys got split up equally into like the different rooms. You as the host could actually jump into every single room that you want to, one by one. So if you need to kind of just check in on how is this group doing, do they need more support, you could jump into like each of those individual rooms if you have like the host capabilities like activated on your account. Okay, and again, I like using a lot of these to get a lot more engagement and interaction with the people that are in like your club meetings. All righty. Okay, we talked about what that would look like. Again, if you have it toggled in your settings, you'll see if you're the host, like this little breakout room button down here will pop up. You're going to want to make sure that you toggle it. You're going to see over here, how many rooms do you want to make? Now, if you just split them up automatically, like kind of what we did today, it'll just randomly put you in as even numbers as possible into like rooms. But there are times like if you're working on investiture classes, you're probably going to want to make sure that you do this manually, and then you have the list of which students are going to go in which room. And you're going to, this list that's over here on the right, you could actually select each name and tell them like which room that you want them to go into. You just gotta kind of remember which room is which room that you're assigning people to. Okay. All right. So again, like what I've been saying throughout this entire time, like engagement is something that's really important. So I have another poll like here. So if you could go down to this site again, pollev.com. I'm going to need to, and put in the username Jason Osio 797. I'm going to need to go back into that, into my part right here. Okay. Okay. So we have like another activity. All right. You might need to refresh the page a bit to be able to see this, but you're basically going to get like a prompt. Again, this is how one way that you could get like, descriptions and other ways to engage like your kiddos. So over here, let me see if I can share this with you all. This should pop up. Oops. There we go. So as people are slowly starting to type in things, this is, one thing that would just continue to build over time. Let's see. So the prompt was that we put out there is if you were to describe God in one word, what would it be? And I could see that, all right, we have, people as they're continuing to put in, like their words and their input, like our little word diagram here is going to continue to grow. And it's just a good way to just, get some feedback, from your Pathfinders and see like, what is it that they're thinking? And this prompt here at the top, it could change to be whatever it is that you want, okay? And the thing that I think is actually like really cool about this is that, yes, each of you guys individually are putting in words, but sometimes, a lot of you guys might have like the same mind and might put in the same answer. So if you'll notice like here on the screen, words like loving, multiple people have put that in there, which means that, oh, this word is going to be a lot more accentuated as the more people like respond and put in, their input. So yeah, and then this site, for example, like you could only put like 25 people, which I think is perfectly fine for a Pathfinder meeting. But like if you have a paid account, which you're gonna have like thousands of people putting things on here. But this is like one tool that we could utilize for engagement. All right. All righty. And so for our next slide. So now that we've kind of covered, just like the basics of Zoom and just a couple, familiarizing ourselves with the different tools that are there, how do we adapt our Pathfinder meetings? So I think one thing that when the pandemic started, one thing that we really tried to think about is like, how are we going to find ways to really change up how we used to do things and make it current. And so that kind of just forced myself to find a lot more innovative ways to like run your Pathfinder meetings, because it really is like a good thing for you to kind of just switch up your process like a little bit. If you need to find ways to make things more engaging in a different way, like these things all matter to the Pathfinders that we're teaching. So in a way, like the pandemic sort of forced us to think creatively a little bit more. And once you're activating those processes, you could be pretty amazed at how you find ways to make things work. So when you're adapting your Pathfinder meetings, like one, you're finding different ways to do things that are different than how you're used to. You're finding different ways to include the Pathfinders. Like if you have people that, while they're there in person, that might be a little bit more reticent or apprehensive to like doing things, like getting them to participate, over like an online thing. In an online present way, that could be very different, and that could be meaningful to them. You'll for a number of clubs, figuring out ways to transition how you do honors, how do you teach honors, how do you do your workbooks like to an online format. I know for our kids, one of the things that we really struggled with is that like you have your kids that are really organized, they have their stuff together, they know where their books are, and that's great for them. And then you also have the kiddos that you gave them the book last week and it's already missing the next week. They lose their materials. They're just not on top of their stuff as you would like them to be. So sometimes it really helps to have a workbook that's there online that they could touch back to, that won't get lost, that they could continue to like edit. And I'm telling you, like your kiddos are pretty on top of like whatever it is that you do technologically. Like I know that for a lot of our adults here, the struggle might be very real on how to utilize these online formats, but like your kids have been doing this throughout the entire time like they've been in school, so they're pretty well informed and very technologically savvy in accessing this. A story that I like to tell about this is when we first started our meetings, I did this whole like online training on this is how we're going to run our meetings. These are the tools that we're going to be using. And I'm going to teach you as all the adults and as our staff, this is how like we are going to use this during our Pathfinder meetings. And like it took 2 weeks for our Pathfinder staff to kind of learn how to like do some of these things. But then literally the first day that we started meeting like with our Pathfinders, like, like over Zoom, I didn't even need to give the instructions to the kiddos. I automatically said, you guys know how to use Google Drive, right? Okay, click on this link and then you're going to make edits to like these workbooks and to these pages, or open up like, a new Google Doc. Like I don't need to break things down for them. They already know. And if your kiddo doesn't know, like there's another peer that's in their group that easily knows and how to access that information. So you really want to learn to lean into others that are a bit more technologically savvy. So like in the case, like for our club at Glenda Filipino, like my mom is my mom's like, the technical director, but doesn't really have a lot of those tech savvy prowess. So she had to bring me in to kind of just who knew enough technology to integrate like our meetings over Zoom and utilizing spreadsheets and documents so that we could easily access and reach out to our kids a lot more efficiently. So if you as the director are having a lot of difficulties in trying to figure out, I don't like, I know that you talked about this Zoom and these are the features, but this is still too much for me. Like it is perfectly fine for you to find the staff member, and it could literally be one of your TLTs or two of your TLTs. Like, I promise you, they know how to do these things. So you could lean into like them that have the skills to kind of just run things. And you could even, help delegate some of those things. Like, I don't know how to access them. I don't know how to send these emails. Can you please be in charge of this and whatnot? And again, it teaches, them responsibility, and you're utilizing someone that has a strength that you might not have, and it's very good for us to again think collaboratively with those that are on our teams together. All right. And one of the things that I love about Zoom is that we're able to reach people that have difficulty attending meetings in person. Like we definitely have the case where, like, in our club, we have some individuals that live fairly nearby who have no problem coming to church or coming to like our meetings. Their parents are more than happy to give them a ride, but at the same time also we have like some Pathfinders that live in like Fontana and it's a very long drive to get to our meetings, all the way like in Glendale. So doing our meetings over Zoom actually kind of helps cut that distance time, and helps it so that it reaches out to the people that really want to be there for Pathfinders, but don't have the means to, or have difficulty being able to access like a meeting like with us. So we actually get more people that tend to participate, versus like if we are meeting in person, those people just wouldn't come all together. So I like that in this day and age where we have tools like Zoom, so that we could actually access the people who don't that would have difficulties in touching base like with their club. So what I'm going to go over with you guys also is just like a sample meeting format of like what I've developed like with our club at Glendale Filipino. We do this every single meeting. It is a PowerPoint presentation that I'm more than happy to share with you guys if this is something that you're interested in utilizing like with your club. I love to share. So if you want some of these things, like just definitely shoot me out an email and I could connect you to that. But every session I have a PowerPoint presentation that I pop up and I share my screen, and this is exactly what it is. It's like, hey, thank you guys coming to our Pathfinder meeting today. We're going to go over our opening exercises, and that's going to be the pledge and law, the Pathfinder pledge and law, the pledge of the flag, the aim and motto, the song, and a prayer. Okay, and this is usually where I, call on individual people like over Zoom, and I let them know ahead of time when you're doing your part. Make sure that you unmute your mic. I think sometimes with a lot of directors or like teachers, kids needing to be on camera so that we could see their face, is a must for them. For me personally, like, it doesn't really matter to me if I see their face. Like, it would be nice to, but what matters to me more is that that they're engaged, versus if I need to see them. So I'd rather take engagement over the visuals. So, but this is something that like you would want to definitely set up. That you'd want to set up. Okay. Now, the slideshow definitely has the different parts. So it has the pledge to the flag. It's over there on the right. It goes over to like what the Pathfinder pledge and law is. Again, a student is usually leading this with everyone. We have our aim and motto. We have a Pathfinder song, and then it helps to kind of just have, the Pathfinder song on your webpage ready to go, versus just, trying to find it, as the time comes. So being prepared to these meetings also helps. And then we have our prayer. And then usually after that, There's like a devotional, like either prepared like by myself, by like our chaplain, or like if a Pathfinder or Pathfinder unit is leading out in devotion, this is where that like would be for them. Okay. And different people do different things. Like for this particular lesson, I had a video that I showed to everyone, and then we did a discussion like over it. All right. So that's like a basic structure of what we do. Now, depending on what your activities are going to be for that Pathfinder meeting, this is what your level of preparation is going to kind of matter. So, before I get into that, so sorry. One, again, I'm always thinking about, are people engaging with us? Are people enjoying what we're doing in our Pathfinder meetings? So I want to make sure that people are participating as much as possible. So sometimes like we'll introduce like an icebreaker, usually something that gets as many people participating as possible. Okay. And it just usually kind of helps set the tone like of your meeting, because a lot of times, like if you're just kind of doing the same thing over and over again, your Pathfinders, like, they're kind of at that age where they get bored pretty easily. So you're going to need to constantly find ways to involve them and think of like, different activities that they enjoy so that they look forward to like coming to your meetings and whatnot. And, we could definitely talk about a couple of the things that we've done. For this, but I usually like having an icebreaker whenever I do like meetings with my Pathfinders, if like there's enough time in our day to like really work on it. So again, depending on the structure that you have or the activities that you have planned for your Pathfinders, you'll probably like honors is one thing that you'd probably work on. I will probably say, like, if you're really thinking about actively engaging like your Pathfinders, and if you're thinking about making sure that things appear, interesting like to them, and you want to captivate that interest, you're going to probably want to spend, at least some time in making things, visually entertaining for them. So, so whenever you're doing like an honors class, like I don't have all the slides for this one. I could show you what it looks like, towards the end if you want me to, but like you're going to want to put in things like, okay, here's some visuals that they could touch base with. Because I promise you, if you're just talking like for an hour straight about honors online, you're not going to get a lot of engagement. So you're going to want to put things like those polls. You are going to want to, call on kids every so often to answer this question. Like as part of the pizza making honor, there's, there's a requirement list that says find a Bible verse that talks about, like leaven. And so you could assign the kids like to find like each one of those verses and get them actively involved in that honor like with you. And so with that participation, like they're less likely to kind of slump around and just have that Zoom meeting like in the background, which I know a lot of us tend to do when we're not engaged. Okay, but again, doing stuff like this is also going to take a certain amount of prep work. So if you're that person that's if you really want a lot of engagement and a lot of creativity to be shown in your Pathfinder meetings, it means you're probably going to need to put a little bit more work and effort into it. Okay. We also did like an American Sign Language honor. So again, just finding different things that would honors that would like interest them, like is usually a good place to start. At the beginning of our Pathfinder year, I did a survey with our Pathfinders to look over all the all the Pathfinder honors that were there, and I told them, give me the top 10 of what it is that you want to do this year. And so after getting the survey and like their top 10, then we find ways to integrate that into like and how we're planning things for the year. So our first honor that we did for this year was like pizza making, and then we had like sign language because we have performance thing that we want to do, and then like later down the year, I know we're going to go over like photography, and oddly enough, a lot of them wanted to do babysitting, but that's a preference of theirs. So like definitely seeing like what is their interests, what are the things that they want to do in your Pathfinder, like getting all that information from your Pathfinders, is very helpful in making sure that your kiddos are, like really engaged in your meetings. All right. Towards the end of the meeting, I always like to make sure that that our Pathfinders know exactly what is coming up. Even with me actively projecting, hey, this is what we should look for in the upcoming month. Like I still kind of have to send an email out like that week, and for the Pathfinders themselves, the day, like before, just to make sure that they are aware that, hi, we have this meeting here, and hey, this is what we're going to be doing. Or especially if I'm going to be working with like a lot of the TLTs, letting them know, hey, we're going to be doing this lesson. I'll need you to be in charge of like this, and this. So just making sure that they priming them for what's supposed to happen in the month or like that week. I have this update section like in each of our meetings, because people like to be pretty well informed of what they're going to be doing. And then we always like end up closing like in prayer. This is like, this format is pretty much what I use every single time like we're in a meeting with our Pathfinders. Now, let me show you guys this as well. So with that PowerPoint, that basically like helps me visually tap into what we do with our clubs. I also have like other things that that I've created and I utilize with our clubs frequently. So, and this is for you, those of you that are incredibly tech savvy, and especially if you're a teacher, like please don't judge. Like I'm at a very basic level of this, but like we have a Google Classroom that like that I've put together that has all their investiture classes. So, and I've linked all the kiddos like books. So I made all these like myself. I adapted it from the investiture level classes, but if you could see like over here, each of the classes, they're individualized, I made it so that they could find a way to do these things all online, versus having to write in their books, because I promise you, half these kids have lost their books already. So it kind of just helps to have like an online format that they could touch base with, that we could pull up every single time in case like, things go missing and whatnot. But this is again, like, just like another tool that we integrate, the technology into like our Pathfinder sessions. So yeah, like that's pretty much it.